This positive psychology study is from my alma mater, University of Pennsylvania. And if you guys haven't been following all my talks about psychology, make sure to follow this playlist right here. Now, one thing I want to say about this professor, this Amishi Jha, remember that story I told you guys about NSO, New Student Orientation? One of the big lectures we all went to was her kind of just talking about psychology, and she did a really good presentation. I will give her credit. On top of that, she's Indian American, and she wore this sari, and man, she was extremely attractive. This dude has a thing for South Asian women, and it probably started with, let's spare the funniness and let's talk about the study. We've been talking a lot about how a lot of psych, they just don't pay attention to sample size and statistical stuff. Basic statistics. This is another example of that. I think we all, from our anecdotal, aka our personal experience, and from talking to other people, which is also personal experience, meditation, different types of meditation, they really help. But that doesn't mean when you do a study, you can be lazy, right? And that's the distinction. I'm glad that there are studies like this, but it still doesn't excuse if its methodology is not too good. So check out the sample size, because that's what we always love to do. Check this out. Participants. There was a meditation group, 17 participants, mean age 24, standard deviation 2.5. So that means they were probably grad students, but we will see. Were recruited from MBSR courses offered to medical and nursing students. See what I saw? See what I predicted? 17 medical and nursing students at University of Pennsylvania. And then there was also a control group. The 17 participants in the control group were recruited from among medical and nursing students at the University of Pennsylvania. So you've probably heard me use this term. This is another example of a convenient sample. A convenient sample basically means a comedian sample. Throwback if you remember that video. It basically means you didn't want to put any effort into actually finding people that represented our world. So you just said, okay, I'm just going to find the quickest people. Of course, you're going to find medical and nursing students. Do we even have to talk about the skew in that? Medical students and nursing students at University of Pennsylvania. Does that even represent the top 1% of the population? Or does that even represent 1% of the population? It does not. Think about the selection bias. It's not just University of Pennsylvania, which at that point when I went to college had maybe an acceptance rate of around 8 to 10%, I believe. A little bit lower. I'm probably overestimating it. It's probably around 5 to 7%. But this is medical students. So I don't know how many people go to med school. I don't know how many people apply to med school. I don't know how many people can get into University of Pennsylvania's medical school. And same with the nursing school. The nursing school at University of Pennsylvania is one of the most competitive schools because University of Pennsylvania, besides having the #1 ranked business school, also had the #1 ranked nursing school. You could say these were not just 1% of a population. These were 1% of a 1% of a population. To Amishi Jha and her other writers' credit, she does mention here, although our results were reliable and significant because you did some arbitrary math on it. Our training groups included relatively small numbers of participants. How about don't even try to BS that? It was a convenient sample. You don't want to say that, right? But relatively small numbers? Come on, 17 people from a specific 2 schools in an Ivy League university. I get what she's trying to do. She's basically trying to say, look, we're doing a pioneer study. So of course, we're not going to get everything right. So let's just take this at face value and then you guys do 100 more studies, right? That's kind of what she's doing. But still, man, you can't just say, well, this is the first in its type, so let's just do a convenient sample. This is where you guys will say I'm repeating myself, but we have to emphasize this because society doesn't seem to understand this. What types of biases, what types of skews will 17 students in the experimental group and 17 students in the control group, med student and nursing students, what type of skews, what type of biases do they have? First of all, nursing students, probably mostly girls. Med students, maybe not, but there might be a little gender bias here. If they're going to med school or nursing school, they're probably under a lot of stress. On top of that, if they're going to med school and they're going to nursing school, you know what they've probably heard of? They've probably heard of a lot of this stuff. They're more likely than the average person in the 2000s to hear about different meditation techniques and meditation retreats and yoga. If you guys remember, yoga wasn't really becoming a thing until the 2010s. So knowledge-wise, cognitive bias-wise, there's a difference between a group of people that participated in the experiment and what you would call normies. We could go on and on. For example, these are probably high-achieving people, so they've probably been stressed out for most of their lives more than the average person. What does that mean? For those of you who are very stressed out, who have had a lot of pressure on you, you either become very zen, that in itself makes you different than the normie, or the other extreme, you become more neurotic. Neurotic with an N just means your emotional regulation's a little bit different. So either compared to the average person, you might be more likely to not be affected by positive and negative stimuli, or contrarily or conversely, you might be really, really extra affected by positive or negative stimuli. I don't have to talk more. I think just by giving some examples of potential biases in the population, you start to understand. I get it that positive psychology was a emerging field, whether funding-wise or whatever-wise, maybe there wasn't as much going to it, but that really shouldn't take away your ability to do a slightly better study in the statistical department when it comes to sampling. This is stuff that any statistics teacher in high school would have just looked at this and been like, WTF, man. So if they slightly more in their discussion section just admitted to the fact that, you know what, the sample size, we kind of cheaped out on it, I wouldn't have ripped it. And guys, Marty Seligman, who's the father of positive psychology, he actually visited my class one time to give a lecture. And the really funny thing is, the father of positive psychology had the angriest, saddest face, man. You can't make this stuff up. This is how comedy's made. Look what Marty Seligman did in his study. First of all, let me give you the sample size of his study. He was looking at very happy people. He looked at 222 college students at the University of Illinois. Now, one thing I want to make it clear to you guys is you don't want to look at the quantity of people. Doesn't matter. You want to survey the entire world and you get 1,000 people from Monaco. It doesn't matter that you got 10 or 1,000 people from Monaco. That doesn't represent the world. You have to look at the sample and how representative it is. That's a common confusion for people who haven't studied statistics. They think, oh, 222, that's pretty good. It doesn't matter because it's still 222 college students at the University of Illinois. Geographical, academic, social economic type of biases. Look what Marty Seligman wrote in his discussion. Our study's conclusions are limited by the sample and by its correlational method. Look at that. He not only admitted sampling issues, but also the fact that it's correlational. Correlation does not equal causation. Just because two things map together, seem to go up together or go down together, does not mean one thing causes another. So that's the first thing he says. That's honest academic honesty, right? That I can get behind. Broader samples and longitudinal methods will be very desirable in the future. That is how you fess up to things. Now I can take him seriously because he's admitting, okay, there's a lot of issues. I'm still going to try to make some assumptions and make some extrapolations, but I will fully say this so all of you can be inspired to do even better studies. You see, this is why as much as Seligman had the angriest face, and I was surprised he was the father of positive psychology, that's why he's the father, because he at least has basic social intelligence to not write something beyond what's acceptable, so people like me, slightly neurodivergent people, aren't going to rip up a study like I did here, right? I'm keeping the Seligman study, but this one, it's claiming a little too much, man. So I didn't expect that I was going to talk about the Seligman study too. Basically, what the Seligman study talked about, he looked at people who, through different measures, were very, very happy and saw how they did, basically. So we can look at that study in the future, but honestly, because we know the sample size has issues. Maybe it's not worth it to look at it. It's sort of wasting my brain space, but I acknowledge that he at least had the integrity to acknowledge it. Anyways, guys, this was a fun little exploration. I never thought I'd synthesize it. One of the things that Marty Seligman kept saying when he was giving a lecture to our positive psychology course, he said, synthetic intelligence, we need synthetic intelligence. So he kept saying that, and I guess maybe I'll send this to Marty. This is a really, really good little talk to send to Marty. Look at that. I synthesized two things together and made it about something different. Positive psychology right there. Okay, Jerry out.